I've had that, in my notes of Obadiah, I've had that saved. I couldn't tell you how many years now. Because that's actually a theme of Obadiah. Kicking someone while they're down. And you'll see that as we get into what this judgment looks like upon how this particular nation would kick another nation while they were down, that would abuse them, take advantage of them. And so there are a lot of lessons you actually learn from a silly story like that, but actually has a lot of pertinence, one, to our life, but two, to what Obadiah is going to be discussing here for us in just a moment. So the book of Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament. It's only 21 verses. But I appreciate some of my very lovely brethren earlier, before everybody else got here, excited, saying, hey, it's 21 verses. We ought to be able to cover this in one study. I'm not going to call anybody out, but they know who they are as they're sitting over here in the middle with a bag of candy. But Obadiah, it's easy to flip past. It's 21 verses. It's short. But this is an amazing prophecy that we're going to look at when it comes to Obadiah. So to set the stage for the book, we need to learn about Obadiah himself. So let's begin with what we know about Obadiah. We know his name is Obadiah, which means servant of Jehovah. All right, well, that was easy. Now we can look at what we don't know about Obadiah. We don't know his lineage, his birth, his timeline. Nothing is mentioned. In fact, the only thing we know about Obadiah is his name. That's it. And the sad part is, Obadiah is not even a unique name. There's at least a dozen references in the Old Testament to Obadiah, which makes dating the book quite challenging. But based on the context of the letter, based on what's happening, you put Obadiah around the time of the fall of Judah when Babylon comes in to conquer. And really, there's two date theories on this. It's either when the Philistines come in, so you're in the mid-800s, or you're in the late 500 BC when Babylon comes in. That's the only two that it could possibly fit. Based on what's said, it's stated to be around the time of the Babylonian destruction of Judah. Obadiah was raised up as a prophet to give one message one time. That was it. And this message is not for Israel like all the others we've looked at so far have been. It's not for Judah either. The subject of this prophetic writing is the nation of Edom. The Edomites are the neighbors to the Jews to the south. If you think about a mental image, I guess I could have put one on the screen for you. If you think about the mental image of the Canaan land, you've got Judah over here to the south, and below it was Edom. They were neighbors to the south, but their history, it goes much further than a border. Their history is their relatives. Edom is the name of the descendants of Esau, who is the twin brother of Jacob. And not only did the Edomites, not only did they take their turn in going to war against the Jews, they wouldn't allow Israel to pass through their land. They would cheer on others that were waging war against Israel with a complete misunderstanding to the nature of God. So a couple of things we're going to look at to understand Obadiah before we ever even get to the text of Obadiah. So to understand a lot of what we're going to talk about here is Edom should have understood the nature of God, and they failed to understand this. See, Proverbs 24, verse 17 and 18 says, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it, and it displeases him, and he turns his wrath away from him." But there's still another problem for Edom that we're going to focus on almost equally as much, and it's what you see on the screen right here, this idiomatic statement almost of saying the sin of nothingness. It's a two-part problem for Edom. Yes, they kicked them when they were down, but before that, they did nothing. They did nothing to help their brethren who was being attacked by the Philistines, and then a few hundred years later by Babylon. They just sat back and watched. In fact, they went further than that. They handed some over to the Babylonians, and then they waited to swoop in after they were gone to loot the land. So this is a reality that the Bible speaks of that a lot of people are not happy with, they're not going to like. But do you realize, in studying Scripture, that doing nothing to help someone when you're able and capable is a sin? The sin of nothingness. And listen, Don, I don't want you to take my word for it. Take the Bible's word for it. James 4:17. "Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him into sin. Which is exactly what Edom is guilty of. And that's why God is about to do what he does to this nation. So let's get into the text now, and let's see the vision that comes to the prophet Obadiah. Obadiah verse 1. I'm going to do my best not to say chapter 1 over and over again, because when there's not a chapter, it just throws me every time. So Obadiah verse 1. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a report from the Lord, and a messenger has been sent among the nations, saying, Arise, and let us rise up against her for battle. Now, that's not a good way to start a prophecy if you're Edom. What was the gist of the vision that he's seeing? Well, he says, let us rise up against Edom for battle. The problem is, when he's saying, let us rise up, what he's saying is, God is on one side, Edom is on the other, and God is about to go to war against Edom. And there is no battle in this when God goes to war against you. It's called judgment, and then it's done. And now God, in his foreknowledge to us to question things, he doesn't leave us to wonder why. Because of what all Edom has been doing, he tells us this. And so to understand the dichotomy we have between Edom and Judah, and really it's Judah-Israel combo, but in this case it's going to be against Judah. You have to go all the way back to the beginning. So you go back to the beginning of God's covenant with Abraham. God told Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, I'm going to make you a great nation. Chapter 12 verse 3 or 4, he says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. That's the call. That's the promise of God in the covenant. Well, then you fast forward just a little ways to the book of Numbers 20, verse 18 and following, and you get the battle just already underway, because Moses, he's leading Israel into the promised land. They make this long journey. They come up to the gates of Edom. They want to pass through Edom to go around up into the promised land. Moses does the right thing. He sends messengers ahead. He says, hey, go let them know we don't want to take anything. We just want to cross by. And what's Edom's response to them? Really, it's two things. They say no, but then what's the warning on top of that? You're not going to do it, but if you do, we'll come out with swords against you. So not only no, but if you do, we're going to kill you. Oddly enough, if you ever go back and read through that, Israel doesn't respond to Edom. Do you notice they just kind of start heading south? Now they're grumbling and moaning, but they don't respond to Edom. They just go about their way. And Deuteronomy 2:5 kind of tells you why. God told Israel, don't mess with Edom. You leave them alone. Let it go. Would you like to know why he said let it go? Somebody, I heard vengeance. You say vengeance. Who does the Bible say vengeance belongs to? God. Vengeance belongs to God. Which is good news, right? But now you're about to learn something else. Vengeance belongs to God is good news. We celebrate that, don't we? We like that detail. Well, good. God's going to go get them. All right. Go get them. God, destroy them. We want to see them fall. This book, Obadiah, will humble you. Just like it did me, just like it should all of us. Because it teaches us about the heart of God, His nature, and that He doesn't want you laughing and enjoying when your enemy is hurt. He doesn't want you rejoicing in their downfall. Because if you do, what did Proverbs 24 just say? If you do that, He will take His wrath away from them. And then you better be careful, because when you keep reading, that wrath can go away from them and full circle right back around to you. Because He doesn't want you rejoicing in that. And so you come to know the heart of the Lord here, that it should make us look in the mirror, but Edom is in the hot seat right now, and that's what they're doing. They're rejoicing in this. And then we're going to add, of course, one of the biggest sins of all, the sin of pride. And so God is going through why judgment is coming upon Edom. Verse 2 and 3. This is God speaking through the prophet. I will make you small among the nations. This is to Edom. You shall be greatly despised. The pride, here it is. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who dwell in the clefts of the rocks, whose habitation is high. You who say in your heart, who will bring me down to the ground? So what's God saying here? I'm about to do this to the Edomites This is from me. Not me, of course. This is from God. He says, behold, someone is going to do this. What does he say? He removes any doubt. Behold, I am going to do this. You won't have to doubt why are you struggling? Why are you falling? Is that I am going to do this. Meaning in the prophetic sense, what he's saying here is I'm going to humiliate you. I'm going to debase you. You will be greatly despised by all when I'm done with you. And remember, Edom, how you sat and clapped as Judah was being destroyed by the Philistines. And you sat and clapped as Judah was being destroyed by the Babylonians because you were prideful. But your pride, that's what he says, your pride has deceived you. What was the pride of Edom? They thought they were invincible. You know why they thought they were invincible? And he tells us here. Verse 3. You build your house, you dwell in the clefts of the rock. The city there, they built their city in the clefts of Mount Seir. And they thought they were invincible because you had the high ground. People couldn't easily come in and attack you. They thought they were good. They set up very high, very proud at where they lived. I mean, they celebrated this. Not only that, they were proud of their wealth, even though it came primarily for looting. They also, there was trade routes through there, to be fair. But they thought in their mind, through their pride, they were unbeatable. You remember the saying, everything that goes up must come down. Which is why God had said, the pride of your heart has deceived you. And listen, that in itself is a sermon, right? I mean, we could sit here for the next 45 minutes and go over just that statement alone. The pride of your heart deceives you because pride is something each and every one of us struggle with. But that's what pride does. Pride is deception. Pride makes you think that, well, I'm the greatest thing. I'm this, I'm that. I'm better looking, and I'm smarter, stronger. We deserve this. We don't deserve that. We're worth this. We're not worth that. And what God shares with us in this verse is the reality that pride is deceptive. It makes you think things that are not true and baseless from your pride, Edom, and for your hatred of Judah, you're going to be humbled. But let's bring in the backstory here. Why the hatred in the first place? Edom and Judah hate each other. And really, again, when you say Judah, we're narrowing it down to this problem, but Judah, the problem with Edom goes far beyond Judah. It's Judah, Israel, even back when it was a unified kingdom, they hated each other. But I already told you, they're brethren, right? I mean, they're family. We went all the way back to Abraham, and you look at the covenant. Well, who's Abraham's son? Isaac. There we go, Isaac. Isaac has two sons, Jacob and Esau. And you get a lot of description about the sons. A lot of history in the book of Genesis 25, especially, covers these two sons. Because you don't realize at the time you're reading this battle between Jacob and Esau is about to extend thousands of years. And we read like it's a little story, but Isaac, he and Rebekah have two sons. Esau comes out first. Esau is described, I've had a lot of fun with Esau over the years. He's described, you remember, bonus points, do anybody remember how Esau is described? Hairy and red. I don't know why. That has always been my mental image every time I've seen that. I don't know why. Even though Marshall thought he was funny, he saw the PowerPoint earlier. And he said, "Is that a self-portrait?" But every time I hear Esau, he's hairy, he's red. It says he smells like the earth. All right, we'll get back to what really matters. I can't help it. I'm sorry. But this centers around what happens in Genesis chapter 25, where Esau's older, right? They're twins. Esau comes out first. As the older son, what does that mean he's entitled to? The birthright. Now the birthright really is three things. You know what they are? Well, he gets a double portion. He gets the paternal blessing. And he's going to be now the patriarch of the family. So there's a lot involved in the birthright. It's a pretty big deal. And Esau, you think he would celebrate that. Esau's a man's man, an outdoorsman. He's a hunter. Again, the Bible says he smells like the earth. Maybe that's good. He comes in from hunting one day in Genesis 25. He's starving. He's famished. Jacob, who was the opposite. Esau is the man's man. Jacob is the mama's boy. He's the tent boy. He doesn't go out. He's there and he's cooking some stew. And just like I've always imagined Esau with that red hair, I've always imagined Jacob kind of sitting in the tent watching Home and Garden TV. And he's got his stew going and he's just kind of hanging out, right? But that's who Jacob was. And so Esau comes in and he's just absolutely famished. He's starving. He says, hey, let me have some of that soup, that stew. Jacob says, no, I'll sell it to you for your birthright. Do you remember the word, the statement Esau makes after that? What good is my birthright if I die of starvation? Now, not surprising, I guess, Jacob means deceiver. But for a bowl of stew, Jacob convinced Esau to give away this great blessing. And in fact, Genesis 25, I think verse 33, 34, in that later part of the chapter, it says, Esau, because of this, he despised his birthright. He hated the whole idea of it because of what he just did. He took that bowl of red stew, and as soon as he took that bowl of red stew, even though his name is Esau, with that red stew, he was given a nickname. Because that stew literally means red. The word is Edom. His nickname became Edom. So you think about this for just a second. That in a moment of desire, and again, every bit of this book preaches. So I'm trying to be careful not to start preaching. But every bit of this book just preaches. Think about this for a second. He traded away this incredible blessing to satisfy a fleshly desire. Now, we don't have to be Bible scholars to see the relevance in that. People do that every day with sin. People, and I hope you're not one, I'll say it this way, I hope you're not one that's willing to trade away a great blessing from God for something like a bowl of soup. And when I say bowl of soup, I don't mean soup. I mean what that soup really meant. Some desire that you have. And because of that desire, he was willing to trade away his birthright. So that's where Edom comes from. Edom comes from Esau. They're the ones being judged here. Now, there's another part of the story you have to understand with Jacob. Jacob means deceiver. And you get another amazing lesson that we're not going to get into, or there's no way we're going to cover these 21 verses, and I don't want to have to hear it over here from him if I don't cover these 21 verses. But long story short, God took a deceiver like Jacob, changed him through Jacob's faith, and then when Jacob's faith was instilled in God, his name was changed also. His name was changed to Israel. There's your two nations. Edom, Esau, Israel, Jacob. Israel means governed by God. Edom just means red.
I had always thought they had sort of made up, And, after Jacob ran off and then he married Leah and Rachel, and they had their kids, I think they went back and met Esau, I think.
Well, they do. Jacob and Esau they make amends. Does sin ever stop at just one person? See, that there's this progression of sin we don't think about very often. And so, Jacob and Esau, while they make amends, guess what happens to all their descendants? They never stop fighting. Ever. They fight until they're both essentially destroyed. Now, Judah is going to come back, of course, as a nation, but the Edomites are going to be completely destroyed. They never stop fighting. There's that progression of sin from just these two stealing birthrights and fighting that continue through two nations. That's the power of sin if you're not careful. That's exactly what it does. And so Edom despises Israel. They despise Judah. And when you mix despise with pride and arrogance, you have just a dangerous combo. And that's essentially what God says here. When he's explaining this, why they're being judged. Now he's going to get into the actual reasons here in just a moment, but he's dealing with the arrogance they have first. And again, God's going to humble them. Reality is God's going to humble everybody. So verse 4, he says, though you ascend as high as the eagle, and though you set your nest among the stars, from there, and here it is again, I will bring you down, says the Lord. If thieves had come to you, and this, listen to 5 and 6, this is an interesting phrase. If thieves had come to you, if robbers by night, oh, how you will be cut off. Would they not have been stolen till they had enough? And if grape gatherers had come to you, would they not have left some gleanings? Oh, how Esau shall be searched out, how his hidden treasures shall be sought after. So, understand what he's saying here, because he's telling you about the judgment here. He's saying, you think you're up so high, you're safe in your hills, I'm going to bring you down. I'm going to do this. Even if you build your city in the stars, you can never go high enough to escape God's judgment. He says, I'm going to bring you down. So much so that if you listen to what he said in verse 5, if a robber were to come into you, they would have stolen what they want and then they would have left. They couldn't have taken everything. There would have been something left. And then he goes into the grape gatherers. Even if they come in and took all the grapes, they couldn't have got them all. There'd have been some left. That's not going to be the case with you, Edom. That's his point here. There would have been something left, but you, that's not the case. There will be nothing left. Nothing will be overlooked. Riches gone, prosperity gone, power gone, and the final blow, all the people will be gone. All right, we got to jump down. Jump down now to verse 10. See, God's going to explain now why. And he's told us a little bit about pride, but he actually now gives us the examples of what they did that caused this to come. What was that final blow that God's going to bring this judgment out upon them? So the first thing he says in the charges against Edom, verse 10, he says, for violence against your brother Jacob, shame shall come over you, and you shall be cut off. And here it is, verse 11. In the day you stood on the other side, in the day that strangers carried captive his forces, when foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, even you were as one of them. In the day you stood on the other side. So he's saying they came and they ransacked Jerusalem, they ransacked Judah, and what did Edom do? You stood on the other side and did nothing. You were just there. You didn't do anything. In fact, they did it twice. With 2 Chronicles 21, they did it with the Philistines. They didn't do anything. They just kind of sat back. Edom stood back and watched it happen. And they do it again with Babylon when they come in and destroy Judah. They just stand there and they do nothing. You did nothing. That's the sin of nothingness to help them during this time. To know to do good and not do it, the Bible says, is sin. You saw this. You could have done something. You did nothing. How many, if you could question these people in Judah or Edom that were about to be destroyed, how many of them do you think would say, well, hang on, we didn't do anything. Why are we being judged? We didn't do anything. What did God just say the problem was? You didn't do anything. You could have helped. You should have helped. You had the ability, and you did nothing. Plus the fact the Bible says in Numbers 32 that your sins will always find you out. There is no hiding. So the first charge, they did nothing to help. Now the next charge, verse 12, he's going to go through 4 of them. Verse 12, but you should not have gazed on the day of your brother in the day of his captivity, nor should you have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor should you have spoken proudly in the day of distress. See, it wasn't enough that they did nothing to help. Now they're basically kicking them on down. Now they're celebrating all this. Remember what we said in Proverbs 25. If you're rejoicing when your enemy falls, God does not look favorably upon that. They're celebrating the fact that Judah's being hauled off into captivity. They're glad. and God says that's a mistake. You should not have done that. God does not want us cheering as our enemies fall in hard times. Now, tell me that's not a lesson for today. Again, Obadiah is one of the most powerful minor prophets. It just preaches. Every bit of Obadiah just preaches. You have no idea how hard it is for me not to just go full-blown soapbox up here and just start preaching. I'm trying to leave some room for questions. That was for you, Stephen. I didn't literally mean that, but go ahead.
Well, in Jesus, he was talking about in Matthew 25. Remember, Jesus talks about the ones who they see things, people in need. They see you hungry and did not bring me food. They
Naked and clothed,
thirsty and did not bring me drink. They saw me naked and not clothed me. And he said, those are the ones who are going to go into judgment. And this is kind of reminds me of that, a little bit, because God is telling you, you didn't do anything to help.
You didn't do anything to help, and you celebrated the fact that you did nothing to help and they got destroyed. So really it's twofold there. And so I've got this written down in my Bible, and I always come to this point when I read this, that this is something we don't think about very often. This idea of celebrating when our perceived enemy gets knocked down. And I'm studying through Job. I know a while ago y'all did a long study through Job. But there's a statement he makes in there that when I was reading through that, as soon as I read that statement, Obadiah came to mind. And it was this celebrating when these people were falling. And Job, nobody would want to be Job, right? Job's just this testing he's got going on where, he's just lost his family. You know the story of Job. But when you get down to chapter 31 of Job, he actually stops and he's asking God, he said, God, is it that I have rejoiced over the destruction of someone who hated me? He's just asking, did I do it? Did I rejoice over the fact that my enemy fell? I don't think I did. He says in the next verse, I didn't do that. I don't think I did, but he's almost posing like a question. Did I rejoice when somebody fell? Is that what my problem was? Did I do this? Because he realizes and he understands God takes that kind of thing seriously. So they did nothing. They rejoice when they fall. Now they're going to kick them while they're down. Did you have your hand up, Brother Parker? That little twitch you do, it gets me.
I wrote something.
Noah, did you put your hand up? I felt like you did. Okay. Verse 13, now the next problem. He says, you should not have entered the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Indeed, you should not have gazed on the affliction in their day of calamity, nor laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. So they stood by, they did nothing. They celebrated as they were being hauled off. Now what did they do? They looted. They looted from Judah who just got destroyed. They went in and took all their stuff. So, first kick. And not only did they take their stuff, do you understand that this problem right here makes its way into the New Testament? This problem right here, they come in and they take their stuff, but they also take some of their land. They take the southern portion of Judah. Do you know what that land is going to be called now? Idumea. There's a very prominent person early on in the New Testament from Idumea. His name is King Herod. The same King Herod who's going to have all the male children killed because he wants Jesus killed. He comes out of that land as an Edomite. So what's happening here it goes way past just what we're talking about. Then verse 14, the final one, he says, this is where you truly see the hatred here. He says, you should not have stood at the crossroads to cut off those among them who escaped, nor should you have delivered up those among them who remained in the days of distress. So he says, you did nothing. You cheered when they fell. You stole from them. And now it just went from bad to worse. So what was the last thing they did? So Babylon comes in. And it's the same thing. Whether it's the Philistines or Babylonians, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. When they came in and the city was being overthrown, people were fleeing south, trying to get away from their captives that were coming through there. And yet the Edomites were there at the border, caught them, and carried them right back to the Babylonians. If they didn't just kill them themselves. They carried them right back. Sounds like you think you got problems like Thanksgiving dinner. This is family doing this. And again, God saw all this. Not only did he see this, God is going to judge Edom because of all this. Their pride, their arrogance, their hatred for their brethren, their unwillingness to help, take advantage of those in need. God basically says, okay, here you go. You want to know what your reward is? Fine, here you go. Verse 15. For the day of the Lord upon all the nations is near. The Bible always talks about this. Judgment is soon. Jesus is coming soon. Judgment near. It's the urgency of all this. He says, for the day of the Lord is upon all the nations is near. And here it is. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your reprisal shall return upon your own head. Now the day of the Lord, remember when you get to the New Testament, when you say the day of the Lord, what's he talking about in the New Testament? Judgment Day. The day of the Lord. The day. Now in the Old Testament you find that same phrase, the day of the Lord, but you're finding that just now being narrowed down to nations. Judgment is what he's describing in the Old Testament. What you did and how you treated others, it's going to be returned to you. In fact, it's the spiritual principle that Paul taught in Galatians 6 when he says, what a man reaps, so he sows. And what did he sow, so he reap? Yeah, did I say that backwards?
Yeah.
Well, I'm used to this kind of guy. Believe me, I know y'all correct me in a heartbeat. Do what? Yeah. Not to be mean about it, but you do. No, I know. Think about what he just said. All right. What you did and how you treated others, it will return to you. Now again, I'm going to stay off my pulpit area over here. Do we not see principles today still in this? Because if you've got an enemy out there right now and they fall, what's the first thing that it's just natural for us to do when we see somebody that is an enemy, perceived enemy. Now we don't have Edomite kind of enemies, but people we don't get along with. First time they fall, what do? Yeah, that's karma. Have you gotten that from anything God's judging Edom on? And the true celebration of destruction like this. Now, the enemies of God, He's taking care of this. And so you read through the Psalms, David's rejoicing that, hey, your enemies, you're going to take care of. And I'm rejoicing in the fact that you're going to do what's right and just. But every time we talk about our vengeance and our revenge and is it ever shined upon positively? Never.
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord.
Did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay.
So, you think God is unhappy with us at the end of World War II? When everyone in the free world rejoiced at the total destruction of Hitler?
So I don't get into the game of what I think made God happy.
No, but I mean, from this, does it apply to something like that? I mean, a total evil.
So, to apply it to a national war like this, to say, and again, now you're having to do greater good theory, right? We went to war. You think about how many people died in all the wars that's been fought, right? Does God rejoice in any of that? Well, did good come out of it? So you're going to start going in circles now, trying to answer a question that belongs to God to say He approved, doesn't approve. Now, if you're doing something that God doesn't approve of, do you think He doesn't have the power to step in and end it? So, I mean, I don't know.
Do you understand my question?
I do, but it's kind of a hard one to. I don't ever want to speak on behalf of God without God saying it first. So I'm always careful to say, oh no, God's fully supportive of everything the United States has ever done, but I doubt it. You know, yes, sir.
Yeah, things like that. Sometimes we celebrate, like in the end of World War II, we wasn't celebrating destruction. We were celebrating the end of something or something better. So, I believe it's a difference in what they were doing and what we did. A lot of people rejoiced that Hitler was gone.
Well, and you think about how many lives were lost because of it. So, and that's the thing. I don't think that you would ask anybody, hey, is it a bad thing that he was killed, and is it a bad thing that the war was over? I don't think you're going to find many people that say no, it was a bad that it was a bad thing. But again, now what the Bible does explicitly say this: God hates the shedding of innocent blood. Was he innocent? So again, no one in this room can speak and say, well, God approved, because God didn't say that. And so all you can do is live to the morality that the Bible gives us, and then let God sort the rest out. So I mean, I'm not trying to tiptoe around it, but I kind of have to, because I don't know. I can't. We know war is a part of life. It's been a part of life from the time, basically from the establishment of the world. But governments are they're God's principles. They're His creation. So, did God not have the foreknowledge to know that there'd be war? Well, of course He did. So, on what moral? And God authorized Judah and Israel to go to war. So, I could make a lot of arguments to say, yes, God would have supported that. But it would just be me going in circles trying to prove a point based on examples in the Bible. So I can't really answer it. If anybody wants to add anything to it, y'all feel free. I try not to speak for God when it doesn't say, thus saith the Lord. So I'm not trying to beat around the bush on it. Now, I do want you to notice, did he already ring the bell?
Yes.
All right, we're going to jump down to verse 18. So I want you to notice this now, because everyone that questions the Bible, that cannot trust the Bible, I don't think has ever studied the Bible to this level. Because the Bible proves itself over and over and over and over again. It's trustworthy. Verse 18 is one of them. Listen to what he says. This is going to be the destruction of Judah, or the destruction of Edom, excuse me. The house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. But the house of Esau shall be stubble. They shall kindle them and devour them, and no survivor shall remain in the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. Now you say, well, what's so significant about that? First off, do you want to know why it is to this day you will not find an Edomite? They don't exist.
There's some cheese there, though.
Is that where the Edom cheese comes from? Yeah. So you saw my people carted off into a foreign country and you cheered. I want you to know that they're going to last. They're going to come back. The house of Jacob is going to be a fire. The house of Joseph is going to be a flame. But the house of Esau, it's going to be stubble. It's going to be burned down to nothing. And so most nations wouldn't come back after being conquered. God says His people are. They're going to last. Edom, you're going to be stubble. There'll be nothing left. And God uses some language that should get your attention, at least it does mine, that will, basically what He says is you're going to be burned. You're going to be consumed down to nothing but stubble, totally destroyed. And so now you have to bring in history to understand what the validity of the Bible. Because again, he's making this statement, this prophecy, in the late 500 BC. All right, 580, 585. And so Edom is going to begin its destruction over several battles. They're beaten down, beaten down, beaten down. But their final destruction, Edom's final destruction, it comes in AD 70 when the Romans come in. They destroy Jerusalem. Completely destroyed Edom as well. That's why we don't have any Edomites today. But this prophecy is very specific. He says, a fire will be kindled, and you'll be left to stubble. Well, guess what history tells us? That's exactly what happened. See, there's a bit of irony in AD 70 because Edom was just beaten over the head about this. You did nothing. You're going to be judged. All this is going to happen. So when Babylon comes to take over Judah in AD 70, the Edomites, there's about 20,000 remaining. They jump up and say, yeah, we got to go to war with them. We got to go help Jerusalem. It's too little too late. They come into Jerusalem, Romans, they come in AD 70, they completely surround them, and they burn every one of them to death.
Wait a minute. The Edomites were around in the Roman times?
Yeah.
How do you know that? I mean, you were talking about Idumea, which was in the Herod.
The Herod period, yeah. And so because now you got to bring in history. You look at Josephus, he writes about the Edomites. Now you're having to bring in secular history, and it's going to verify what the Bible said, that they're destroyed by the Romans too. They're still there in AD 70. Josephus records, several historians record about it, but Josephus records quite a bit. And he says specifically there were 20,000 Edomites remaining in that period. And they were all killed by the Romans in that destruction.
Did Jesus know any Edomites? I mean,
He knew Herod.
okay.
The Herods, you should say. They're all Edomites. So you think about that their destruction. So history, non-biblical history says their fall came, how the Bible said their fall was going to come 600 years before it ever actually did. So again, every time somebody says something about I just don't know that I can trust the Bible, I don't have enough faith not to trust the Bible. Because it's just proven accurate over and over and over again. Completely destroyed to the point that you're not going to see Edomites today. There are no Edomites left. Any questions on that? We're not going to get to our last three verses. But now you asked some questions that slowed it down, so you can't celebrate that too much. Well, I'll pull some of the, Josephus writes about it, I'll pull some information for you. It's pretty fascinating to read. I always like it when history, because, Bible, they describe the Bible as just a bunch of stories. And I like it when history actually proves the fact that the Bible was accurate. This always makes it more fun. Are any other questions, comments, concerns on Obadiah?